Well, today we're going to be in the shop putting in a set of gauges we've had laying around, had on order, and it finally showed up. Been working on the OBS, but a cold front blew in. 95 degrees yesterday and about 40 with 50 mile an hour wind today. So we ain't going to be working on the OBS. We're going to tidy up a few loose ends on the F100. We're going to get these mechanical gauges put in, because if any of you know anything about these F100s, most of them don't have any factory gauges in it other than temperature and just the alternator. I don't know why they designed it that way. For oil pressure, it just has a light, but it has temperature gauge. The alternator is just a light. I don't know why they would do it that way. I'd rather have an oil pressure light than a gas gauge, to be honest. But we're going to get these mechanical Sunpros put in, and we're going to show you how to do it. Yeah. You're going to want to find a place to mount these. We decided to go in line with the stereo and the heater unit. And we got it clamped in place right now. We're about to drill a hole for the bolts that came with it. The reason we went with the black gauges is because it just matches the interior more, and it matches this old Sunpro tack that I had kicking around in my garage for a while. We're going to go ahead and get this triple gauge pod mounted, and then we'll get to wiring these gauges in. So now you got your gauge pod mounted, you can start trying to get your gauges together. This right here is our oil pressure. It comes with this line, and it's all wound up. Be very careful with this line, because you can kink it and pinch it, and you'll have an oil leak later. What you do is you put that nut over that line, and you put that little crimper deal. I don't know what they're called.
Ice cream cone.
Yeah, some kind of cone. And you can see here, this gauge has got a cone. You just shove that line in there as far as you can get it. Before you tighten that nut all the way, make sure you push that line as far as it will go. Loosen that a little bit.
As far as it will go.
Turn it.
There you go.
Go down here. You're going to snake that plastic line through your pod. Like I said before, try not to crimp that. They do have another kit that you can buy that has a copper line. Especially if you're going to be running by a lot of heat and stuff, it's a lot better. Then you can grab your bracket and go ahead and get that gauge into place. Sunpro gauges, they've been around as long as I know. You know, now they got Autometer and Bosch and all that. I mean, they all do the same thing. So whatever brand you like, it's all pretty much the same principle. Now we got the oil pressure in. We're going to go ahead and start running the temp. You don't want to put this temp sensor through the pod and feed it all the way through. Once you get the gauge in place, you want to put the bracket on the back. Once we get these all into place, we're going to find a good spot in the firewall to run all our lines through, and then we'll get on the outside of the firewall and show you where to hook them up on the engine. Once you're done on the inside, you're going to find two good spots on your firewall to run your lines through. On the oil pressure, we came through here. And on our temperature sending unit, we came through right here. This wasn't ideal, but on this temp sending unit, it's got this big nut on there. And we didn't want to drill a hole that big to try to get through there. You can take the back side of the gauge apart and get it to run through, but it's not much smaller than this, so you don't really get anything by doing that. On that plastic line on the oil pressure, what we do is make the hole big enough, or we can run it through a rubber hose. Or in this rubber hose, we stick it in the hole, and then we run that plastic line through there, so that hole can't cut that line, and then you spring a damn oil leak going down the road. On this particular vehicle, it's got a big block Ford in it. Our water temp is right here on the front of the intake, just behind the distributor. We're going to take this sender out, and we're going to get the new Sunpro gauge sender in. Then on our oil pressure sender is right here at the back of the engine. We're going to get that one out and get our new stuff in. In this kit, it's got 3 different adapters for the water temp. What we're going to do is we're going to throw a little thread sealant on it. We're going to screw in this adapter to the intake, and then we'll be able to screw the temp sender straight into that. You got the adapter down in there. Now we're going to get some thread sealant on the sensor, and then we're going to get it screwed in there. I can already tell right now that's probably not enough thread sealant, but
Is it not?
you're going to take your old oil pressure sending unit out. And you're going to use some fittings and adapters from the kit, screw back in there. You'll be able to hook up your new oil pressure line, a little white plastic line from your oil pressure gauge inside. After we get this tied up, we'll go inside and wire the lights and wire the voltage gauge. Got the new fitting in that was in the kit. The installation of these gauges is pretty much straightforward. think most of your GM stuff, the oil pressure sending units back here behind the distributor. Your small block Ford stuff, it's down by the oil filter. Now what we're going to do now is we're going to run that white line over here, the oil pressure line, and we're going to cut it to length. What we do is we go ahead and put the nut and the little crimp on before we cut that, because you know how every time you cut something it kind of flares and messes up the end. That line being cooled up kind of makes everything a pain working with it. We're going to get this ran and cut the length, and then we'll get inside and wire the voltmeter. Well, we're going to fire this thing up and see if we got any leaks. Any leaks on the oil. Don't appear to have any leaks on the water. Now let's go see what kind of oil pressure we got. Almost 60 pounds. One of these gauges, we would have never known that. Now that we ain't got any leaks, don't appear to be leaking in here on the oil side. What we're going to do is we're going to kill it. We're going to wire this volt gauge. So all in all, gauges work good. Took about 35 minutes for the install. We're going to wait to wire in the lights because we're going to get some LED bulbs and change all this LED. But hopefully this helps y'all get y'all's gauges installed too.